All right, man. Hey, man, main event time.
That's
History
fucking
will be
good.
made. The main event is Islam Makhachev putting his UFC lightweight title on the line against Alexander Volkanovski. So, Makhachev, he is the 31-year-old out of Dagestan, Russia, 23-1 as a pro. He's on quite the win streak, most recently capturing UFC gold by defeating Charles Oliveira by arm triangle choke back in October. Volkanovski, the 34-year-old out of Australia, 25-1 as a pro, 12 knockouts, 3 subs. Also on a ridiculous win streak. He's undefeated in the UFC, 12-0. Most recently coming off of a UD over Max Holloway. His second win over Max. Second or third? Third.
Third, yeah.
That's right. Man, oh man. Omar, let's start with you this time. Give us your take and your pick of this Clash of Champions.
I think it's criminal how under promoted this fight specifically has been. Before we started recording, I sent a picture. I was on the UFC website, preparing, looking at rankings, whatever. When I got to the website, I might as well have typed in fucking powerslap.com because it was just all power slap. There's a little ticker at the bottom for the fight coming up with Islam and Volkanovski on it.
It's better now, thankfully. It's them
well-
everywhere. They heard you.
Well, it's fight week. They're doing the bare minimum as far as I'm concerned. They've got embedded, which I feel like is a given for pay-per-views at this point. So it's not like they're doing anything extra. And I think they should be. I can't, for the life of me, remember the last time we had a legit fight, not only of this magnitude, but of this caliber, right? Like when I talked about it, I think the last time was GSP versus BJ Penn. And I can't really think of another time where we've had something this insane, where we've have arguments over who is the greatest, and then we have
Steve
an opportunity to
DC?
figure it out. I mean, I guess
Maybe not quite. DC
Not-
Bones.
because
DC
because
Bones.
Stipe at the time still didn't come with that kind of aura, right? Like he had
Yeah.
worked his way to get there, but like Islam has almost drifted through through the shadow of Khabib and has kind of surpassed it at this point, right? Or at least lived up to it at the very minimum, right? And so he's kind of walking around with this aura of invincibility. Volkanovski has absolutely battered everyone he's come into contact with for the last 5 years or whatever the hell it's been. And so he comes in with this aura, maybe not of invincibility, but of absolute brutality. And so GSP was the dominant guy, right? GSP was the guy that you couldn't beat because he was just better than you everywhere. And then you had BJ Penn at the time, who was the prodigy. He was just that good. You couldn't beat him. He was gonna, whatever it was, striking, ground game, he was gonna get you. And then that build up, the result was one thing. That was what it was. But the build up to it and the moment of it, it was, I think it was unique. I think it's something that doesn't come around very often. And I think what comes around even less is the actual moment to find out who is the best.
The promos, it's so funny you bring this up. The promos for that fight was what hooked me into my love of MMA. Like I was already a fan. I already watched events, but the promos and the countdown for that fight is when I was like, this is my shit. This is my life now.
Yep.
Because they did such a good job and they could be doing it here. So it's a great
Yeah.
point.
I mean, just a little bit of effort. I mean, let's be real. I feel like everybody who is supposed to be doing the promo, he's got doing Power Slap. And so there is no one else to be doing the promos for this event coming up. I just think it's criminal. I think it's really fucked up. I think to do it why would you do this for this pay-per-view? Why, like, if you did this for any other pay-per-view at this point, I'd almost be like, whatever, you know. But I think it's crazy they're doing it for this one. So that's my rant on that.
I agree. Someone had to say it. Glad it was you, so I don't have to go through it.
Yeah. As far as the fight is concerned, I absolutely love this fight, man. I think these two guys are probably the definition of an immovable object and unstoppable force. In the unstoppable force being Islam Makhachev, and the immovable object very much being Alexander Volkanovski. I think we're gonna see a litany of moments and exchanges that are going to define what the greatest of all time I think is really going to mean. And I think that's why we need a lot of these fights here, because we have two guys who I think have steadily proven themselves to be significantly better than most people in their division, if not everybody in their division. We can make the argument about Volkanovski and Max Holloway, how close the fights were, how close they are in talent. But the reality is Volkanovski, I think, is a level above Max Holloway, and not a lot of people are on Max Holloway's level at all. So I'm fully in love with what this fight really means, and what it brings to the table. The challenges that are presented for Alexander Volkanovski in the ground game, the ability for him to really show out potentially in his striking. I wonder how the size difference matches up, if it's something that plays into Volkanovski's into his game plan and potentially makes it an advantage that he's a lot smaller than Islam, or if Islam literally like big brothers him and just fucking ragdolls this kid all over the place, and we see something that we've never seen before in an Alexander Volkanovski fight. So I'm excited, man. This could really go either way. I'm going to piss off probably half of the audience that listens to us, and I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski by a hard-fought, unanimous decision. 3 rounds to 2.
Mike, you're on mute.
I said the comments,
Yep.
they're happening right now. It's this. Feverishly. All right, Mark, take it.
All right, the odds are wide. I guess not terribly shocking, but they're wide. Islam is minus 380. Alexander Volkanovski is plus 300. Here we go. Number 1 pound for pound versus number 2 pound for pound. Volk trying to become double champ. I can't wait for this thing. Omar already touched on the promotion. I'll just say quickly, I wish it was more. It could have been so much more. This fight could have been an absolutely enormous deal, and for some reason it is not. But to me, it certainly is. To us and the listeners here, I'm sure as well. Obviously, the biggest narrative here is the size. Islam is 4 inches taller. He does give up an inch of reach to Volk, which is a bit wild. But beyond that, Islam is just the significantly larger human. And that size combined with the grappling that we know Islam has is why we're looking at an almost 4-1 favorite. It's just a bit hard to imagine Volk standing up to that grappling being the smaller guy, but it's not impossible. As plenty of people have pointed out over the last couple weeks, Volk is a hard guy to hold down. He's tight, he's compact, he's an unreal athlete, and his mentality is arguably like no one else in MMA. He just will not stop and will not accept a position. And that's what he has said over and over again, that, yeah, he may get taken down, but what happens when he can't keep me down? And I've loved every second of these Volk interviews. The guy's mentality is just fantastic. He really is making me believe he can do it, and he can do it. I just don't know if I can say that he will do it, because for him to pull this off, he's going to have to get up a bunch of times. Like, he may have to get up 4 or 5 times in the first couple rounds, or at least get up 2 and stuff 2 or 3, something like that. It's going to have to hit a point for me to envision Volk winning this fight. I think it's going to have to hit a point where we're 10 minutes in and Islam hasn't been able to make a ton of progress. where Volk keeps popping up and he's making Islam reset, and Volk still looks fresh. And, like, it's the end of round 2, and you see Volk bouncing there going, like, come on, mate, what else you got? Like, that's when we're going to see. If we get to that point, that's when we're going to learn about Islam Makhachev. Because as great as the Oliveira win was, Charles wasn't that type of test. With that fight, it was maybe Charles can finish Islam early. This is the fight where Islam gets to answer the questions of what does he do if he runs into someone who he can't keep down? How does he react if he's stuck in a straight striking battle? And more importantly, how does he look if he has to go late into a fight, if he can't get a guy out of there? And that's Volk's MO, the guy that you can't get out of there. So if we do get to that moment where we're 2 rounds in, and yeah, Islam's been winning, but Volk keeps popping up and he's kind of unfazed and he's waving Islam on, that's going to be a hell of a moment, and that's when you buckle up in this fight, in my opinion. And it's not impossible, but I can't get myself to pick it. I love Volk, man. I think he's absolutely earned being pound for pound number 1. I just can't imagine he is strong enough to deter Islam Makhachev, and the top pressure from these guys, Islam and Khabib, is just like nothing we've ever seen before. You can't move. The plan you thought you had changes, and it changes quickly because you realize how fucked you are underneath these guys. And I always make this point. Islam can strike too. It's not like he's some slouch there. Like, it was the hook that started the finish over Charles. So I can see this being competitive early. I can see Volk get up a couple times. But I think it hits a point where it just starts to feel like Islam is inevitable, kind of the way he always feels. My issue is that I don't know how to say it ends because my brain can't picture Volk being finished in any way. And if it goes 5, that means something went wrong for Islam. So if I'm picking Islam, I got to pick a finish. So I guess I'm going to say he finds a choke. I'll say Islam rear naked choke round 3, and that Volk doesn't tap. He goes out, and Islam is the new pound for pound number 1.
I will say if there's one thing I trust about that fight is that Volk will not get gassed.
Oh, fuck no.
The training that the training that Dan seemingly goes through is absolutely fucking absurd. And even watching him at the tail end of these training sessions, he still has tons of energy to get through it. I don't know how this works. I don't know what he does. I don't know how. It has to be all mental by that stage. And I don't think, love Charles, but he's vulnerable there, right? I'm not going to say he's a bitch and all this other stuff that people get crazy about when it comes to Oliveira, but there are moments where he allows things to happen. Volkanovski doesn't do that shit. It doesn't matter how hard you hit him. It doesn't matter what position you put him in. Like, he's not going to allow or stay or accept the bad positions. Even the Ortega thing, right? Like, he got I don't know if he got caught or he got just tripped onto the ground. But when he got caught in that choke, that man there was no thought in his head of him tapping to that sequence. And he continued, and it wasn't even like he wasn't doing anything and just kind of scrambling and panicking. This man was doing everything he could to get out of there, fully conscious, fully aware of the danger he was in, and never stop fighting. I can't see a world for me where Volk gets outworked and out fought. Honestly, it's like I understand this is Islam. I understand what we've seen. I understand how he's essentially run through everybody that he's come up against. But to a certain extent, so has Volk. And again, we can talk about the Max Holloway fights. Volk didn't really take him down or do anything, have to worry about the ground game as far as that was concerned. But I just think he's so talented, man. And I don't think the ground, I want to believe that the ground is not going to be as terribly productive for Islam as it has been for literally every other guy Islam has fought.
Okay, so, man, you guys both gave such great and cogent points. Yeah, I can't bring myself to pick Volkanovski. I think Islam is going to be just too much for him. I think if Brian Ortega could get Volkanovski in 2 tight submissions, I think if Islam gets him into that, the squeeze of Islam, as great as Ortega is, and as much of a submission sniper as he is, I think that the squeeze of Islam at 155, and he is a big 155er, I said it, is going to be a different feeling than the squeeze of Ortega. Does he get Volk out of there? I'm going to say I think he gets Volkanovski out of there by submission. I'll say round 3. He's going to catch him. I think he's going to have a hard time in round 1. Round 2, Volk might have a little bit of a comeback round, maybe escape some takedowns, and then round 3, Islam's going to do what he does, and Volkanovski is going to be shaking his head. Because Islam is too good, and Islam is going to be too big. And with that, let the comments flood our clip here.
They should be proud of us. 2 of us picked their boy.
That's right.
I'm rolling with the Volk. That's right.
Yeah.
Honestly, man, this is such a great. It's such a good fight.
If it really does hit a moment where we realize, like, oh fuck, it's not working for Islam. Like, look at this boy Volk. It's gonna be the tension of like feeling like holy shit, Volk can actually win this is gonna be crazy.
I mean, if he doesn't get run through in round 1, I mean, I feel like the half the battle is over at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if he can not necessarily survive, right? But if he can be competitive in round 1, if he can not get ragdoll in round 1, if he shows shades of the greatness that is Volk, I don't see this being a gimme for Islam.
Oh, it ain't a gimme. Nothing's a gimme when you're fighting fucking best fighter in the world.
No, according to the fucking
All right.
the line, one would disagree.